Hamilton has a well-documented poverty problem, yet when council was advised that they had received a social service overpayment from the province, they voted in August of this year to divide the money among the wards for capital projects rather than to set it aside for social services. Do you think this is appropriate? And we'll begin with Larry Ianni.
Absolutely not. We have a poverty issue in this city, and any money that we're able to get for social services needs to be spent for what it was intended. And it was also very stupid of council to do that, because we're going to the province asking for each year a top up to our social services money that we need to run programs. And the province isn't blind to these facts. They know that they took $3 million and divvied it up among themselves to do pet projects. And the province is going to say the next time we show up, how can we trust, speaking of trust, how can we trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do with the money we give you? It's short-sighted. If the capital projects that had to be done were so important, we have a capital budget. They should have been funded from that budget. You leave social services money for what it was intended. It was not a good moment of leadership on both these gentlemen's parts.
Thank you. Fred Eisenberger.
So I didn't agree with that. I thought it was important to keep social services money in social services, but the collective will of council put forward by, I can't remember what councillor put it forward, but by and large all members of council supported it, was to do some sidewalks. And there was some rationale to doing that because we have a huge liability issue when it comes to sidewalks in our community. And the belief was, or some of the thinking was, that if we did those sidewalks, we would reduce our liability costs, and we can take that reduction and then apply it to some of the other social service issues that are coming at us. I think social service money should be kept in the social services pool. That is what I advocated for. I didn't win that argument. You don't win all the arguments on council. You're one vote as mayor. I think leadership is all about having a vision for the city of Hamilton, and certainly poverty is high on my agenda. I think it's as important as economic development. And so whenever we get social services money, we should make sure that it's aligned to the very important social service issues that are facing this city. That wasn't done in this case, and I think that's lamentable. But I think there's room to continue to work on poverty issues and social service issues by creating something like a universal food program, which some of that money could have been actually identified for.
Thank you. And Bob Bratina.
Well, as I recall, it was a staff recommendation, and there was some discussion about it. Part of the rationale was, as Fred said, we've got serious issues, especially in the old part of the city, with broken sidewalk. And in my ward, we had a larger than normal percentage of people with accessibility and mobility issues. And it's a serious problem when you come to broken sidewalks and so on. So the fact, I suppose, is that you could consider it as social spending in those terms, in terms of the people with accessibility and mobility. And you have to understand as well that the average cost for a trip and fall that the city pays out, and there are a great many of them, is over $12,000. So you could almost find a way to rationalize it and say that it's a wash. But of course we have to put more emphasis on social service spending. But this was an anomaly that was recommended by staff for what seemed to be good reasons at the time.
Thank you. This is the Bill Kelly Show, 900 CHML. We're commercial free today on CHML and on Cable 14 through the courtesy of Halton Honda, who are our sponsors both today for the mayor's debate and CHML's election coverage on October the 25th that evening. The three main contenders, Larry Ianni, Fred Eisenberger, Bob Bratina, with us in studio. Next hour we'll go to your calls and your emails for your questions for these three main candidates. Probably about time for one more before we finish up this segment. There have been various attempts by certain councillors to realign the city of Hamilton wards so that they are based on population, which will likely result in less representation for the amalgamated regions. What is your opinion on realigning of wards? And we will begin with, where did we go last time here?
I think you started with me.
I think we're going to Fred Eisenberger. Okay, Fred?
Yeah, we've talked about the pluses and minuses of amalgamation, and I'd certainly support having a look at where we've done well and where we haven't done well, and where population and representation is fair and equitable, and where it may not be. I think it's an ongoing process that we have to continue to look at as we work through the unified city and continue to look for balance and fairness across the board. So I would say that it's worth looking at. I think representation in all parts of our city isn't going to be fair. It's not unlike the national representation, envelope where you have PEI represented by three Liberal members. I believe it's 3 Liberal members, as opposed to a province like Ontario. I think when you look at that, you would say it's inequitable, but it's a sense of fairness in terms of making sure that all regions of the city have adequate representation, reflecting the former municipalities and reflecting the kind of the unified portions of our city. So I think it's an evolution that we have to go through. We have to look at representation as being as fair as we can make it, but still reflect the individual identities of all of the communities that we're talking about. And I think that's critically important to maintain a unified city and continue to move forward.
Thank you. Bob Bratina.
Bill, we're stewards of the people, but we're also stewards of the land. And the fact that there are vast tracts with fewer people doesn't mean that we should give less attention to the needs there. And I'm talking about the loss of the farmlands. We've lost 3,000 acres over the past 10 years. And this is an important component of the kind of decisions that we make. So I would say, rather than argue about how many people are in a given ward, we have to do that municipal structural review to determine if we're able to make the best decisions. Can you imagine a group of inner-city councillors sitting on a planning committee discussing land development in Jerseyville? I try to get out. I visit Carlisle and Kirkwall and all of those places. But you have to understand that there's a different character in rural life as opposed to inner city life, because I lived in the village of Wellesley when I worked in Kitchener, and that was a village of 900, and my neighbor was a dairy farmer, and they were more self-sufficient. They would say, I said, you know what you need in this village is you need a rental. And my neighbor, Mr. Stroh, said, just ask somebody. They'll have what you need. You don't need her. So can you see the difference? We have to examine the way this municipality is structured, and we have to make the appropriate changes.
Thank you. Larry Ianni?
Well, the transition board, when they established the rules for representation, said that after 10 years, we should review all of that. We should review the services, municipal services, to see that after 10 years, we're delivering them as best we can and as cost effectively as we can. Bob has taken that to mean that we need to review amalgamation and whether the city stays together or not. A promise that he cannot keep. The province is not on for this at all, and he's misleading people by telling them that he has the power to do that. He's throwing us into turmoil, in fact. But yes, it's always good to review the structures we've got and the programs we've got, and I've called that from the beginning, and now these folks seem to be jumping on board, as well they should, because it's the wise thing to do.
Thank you. A follow-up question. Just before we have to go to you answered this already. We want to get into, I guess it's a related question about governance. And since we're going to talk about review, ward boundaries has come up on a number of occasions on this program. We've talked about, well, we'll get into, I'm sure, the amalgamation/de-amalgamation issue. But one of the other questions that a number of listeners have brought up, if there is going to be a reevaluation of how we are governed in this community, is the idea of term limits for city councillors. And I want to get your thoughts on that. And we'll start with Bob Bratina.
Well, I can pretty much guarantee you that I won't go beyond 2 terms as a mayor. I think you should be able to get what you want done in short order. And I would point to the accomplishments in Ward 2 over 6 years, a term and a bit. The gains, the achievements, the improvements are unprecedented in recent history. And I'll be happy to detail those for you. So I think that you should come in with enthusiasm and an approach, and you should work as hard as you can and get it done. But to linger on year after year after year as a professional municipal politician, I don't think that serves the public in the best way. So would I say term limits? I'd be prepared to think about it, sure.
Thank you. Larry Ianni.
I would agree with term limits, and I think that it's great to also go out in the real world and see how government works for people or sometimes falls short. And these last 4 years that I've not been in government has given me a particular perspective on the frustrations that people who need assistance from their local government and the hurdles that sometimes they have to overcome. So I think term limits serves a useful purpose.
And Fred Eisenberger.
I've always agreed with term limits. I term limited myself, on council when I either decided to go up or out, and took a 6-year break. Did some work at the Port Authority that I think was a good experience for me in terms of understanding the value of our port and what it means to our community. I believe that 2 terms is sufficient for any councillor, quite frankly, to come in with some energy and enthusiasm, do the work that you need to do, and then leave it to someone else to actually take it that little bit further. It works spectacularly well in the United States, where every 8 years you're going to have a change in leadership, and that change in leadership is invigorating and moves the city forward. I could say that in my first term we've done some great things in terms of moving our economy forward. We are doing infrastructure work that has been not paid attention to for many years. We've set a half a point in the budget for capital to ensure that we don't leave that infrastructure work to future generations. We put progressive ideas like light rail transit on the table. Why has council been somewhat overly debating is because there's been a progressive agenda, and that certainly is change that people are reluctant to get into. An integrity commissioner was not well received by this council, but absolutely necessary. And I think when you work on a progressive agenda, you move the city forward. And I think if you can't do it in 2 terms, you can't do it.